Yebo, yebo, yebo. Welcome to Watch Me Build It. Behind me is a braai. In South Africa, that's what we call them, a braai. In other parts of the world, it's called a barbecue. It's a very simple structure, this one. Why am I standing next to a braai? Because in South Africa, braais are very important to culture. They're very simple things, nothing to write home about. You find them made of brick, you find them made of steel. You make a fire, you put some meat on the braai, you cook it, you enjoy it. But while you're braaiing, things begin to happen. While you're braaiing, you talk. You see, that's the way it is with men, right? Men, we don't get together to talk. We get together to do things. We get together to climb mountains, ride bicycles, go fishing, braai meat, look at watches. And while we are doing things, we talk. And as we talk, special things happen. A perfect example of this is what happened recently when a gentleman named Kirk Greer reached out to me. I had posted a video about St. Martin's SN008G, their homage to the Tudor Black Bay 58. I'd mentioned how I thought it was going to be an amazing watch and how I could not afford it, but that maybe I'd be able to raise enough money to buy one. Kirk reached out to me and he explained that he was part of a very special group of people. They call themselves the Brotherhood of the Submariner Homage. He explained that they were making a limited run of the SN008. They were having St. Martin customize them for their group of men, their brotherhood, and that he was keen to send some of those to me for review. I'm actually wearing one of those watches right now, and it is a peach. It's really amazing. But there was something far more special about this watch. It wasn't the watch itself. It's the group of people who made this watch a reality. A few years ago, a gentleman named James wanted to know a little about Submariner homages. Where could he find a decently priced homage to the Submariner? He started a thread on Watch You Seek, and the thread was called The Best Submariner Homage. Well, it turns out men like homages to the Submariner, and this thread became exceedingly popular. Sometime during 2020, it became clear that this was a monster that had a life of its own. And so a new website was established, www.bsh.zone. Essentially, all of the members of this zone are fans of watches, fans of the Submariner, but fans of all kinds of watches. And they really enjoy talking about watches. So I would encourage you, if you like watches, if you like the Submariner, if you like dive watches, if you enjoy modding watches, if you're the kind of guy who doesn't want to spend crazy amounts of money on a Rolex, or maybe you're the kind of guy who does and you still enjoy talking about watches, I would encourage you, www.bsh.zone. Go in, sign up, and jump into the conversation. So there are a couple of different threads on the bsh.zone. BSH-T Charlie is the primary thread. It's the thread where guys post their thoughts on a daily basis. They post wrist shots. They speak about the weather. There's an odd conversation about goats that keeps coming up, but that is the primary thread. But you'll find all kinds of other things, like the BSH-T workshop. I like that thread very much. It's about pulling watches apart. I recently had a great conversation about the Chinese DGETA movements and how you really shouldn't take the stem out because you're probably going to blow the keyless works. That was a great conversation. There's another thread that is a marketplace where guys buy and sell their watches, buy and sell specifically watches, which have been modified with the BSH logo. Just a warning, it's not a marketplace where you're going to make cash. You see, these are watch enthusiasts, not watch merchants. So usually whatever is bought and sold is bought or sold at the price that was paid for it originally. Guys aren't out to scalp one another. They're there to enjoy watches together. Another thread that is fascinating is the BSH projects. So here we get into a little bit of history. So something that became apparent early on in the days of the thread was that it was very, very difficult to get hold of an homage to a classic Submariner. No fear, innovation was near. A dial was constructed. The first dial that was ever made on the BSH thread was actually a paper dial. It was printed, I think, on photographic paper, stuck on top of a normal dial face, and presto, a Submariner homage was born. That first print was done by F. Madrid. Another gentleman, Geliot Z, I think that's how you pronounce it, collaborated with F. Madrid and said, hey man, send me your print, I'm going to upgrade it. And what Geliot Z did was he took a couple of indices from another dial, took them off, inserted them on the new paper dial, and you had a three-dimensional paper dial. This kind of innovation just blew everybody's mind. This is just guys making a plan around something that they're really after, and then a plan was born. Well, if we can make a dial, we can make a watch. Some other subscribers donated a partner's case, some subscribers donated a GMT movement, others donated hands, and a watch was born. And this watch, the first BSH production, went on a world tour. The watch was posted around from one member to the other. Each one got to enjoy the watch, took it out for a couple of outings, a dinner here, a hike there, a sail here, a bike ride there, and photos were taken, photos were posted, and the journey of the watch was shared. This was the beginning of what has happened under the projects of the BSH. The projects have taken two distinct directions. The first is the dials. While the watch was out on tour, F. Madrid hatched a plan, and he had a dial manufactured. This was not a paper dial, this was a proper dial. There was a limited run of 1 or 2 where the loom plots were printed onto the face, but then a full run was done of dials with indices and the Brotherhood's logo, which is an anchor. That was the beginning of a trend. They have made a profound number of dials to date. They've made them with square printed plots, circular and triangular printed plots, indices. They've made them to fit into Black Bay homages. They've made them to fit into Submariner homages. They've made 369 dials. So I would encourage you, go and find the thread that speaks about the history of the BSH dials and watches, and it makes for fascinating reading. There are 2 that I think are worth special mention. The first one is their gilt dial. This is a stunning, stunning dial. So this wasn't done by printing gold on top of black. No, no, no. A disc was polished. I believe gold was overlaid on the polished disc, and then the printing was done in negative relief over the gold. And so this gilt dial is just like the gilt dials of old. It glistens, it shines, and it shimmers. Another dial that really caught my attention was one that is called the Sea Monster. I think it was a 2021 production run, but it's done with the most fascinating loom that stands up in proud relief. No white, gold, or silver to contain the loom. The loom just seems to stand up in pure relief. But a lot of fun has been had. And of course, what the bros like to do is they like to build watches with the dials and post pictures of those watches on the forum, the BSH-T. That's the Brotherhood of the Submariner homage thread. But dials are not enough, are they? You've got to build watches. And so a couple of watches have come out of this endeavor too. One such watch was the Broflake. The Broflake was built for the Brotherhood by Tiger Concepts. It homages a Tudor mill sub. It's got painted square plots. It's made with a snowflake hand. A really beautiful watch. In fact, one of those is currently on the world tour, and I've been lucky enough to sign up for that. It might take a year to get here, but when it does, I will let you know, and you will meet the Broflake. Another watch that they made is called the Sea Dog. The Sea Dog was a collaboration with St. Martin, and it was built around the St. Martin vintage sub. You know, that beautiful little 38mm, but the Brotherhood had it revved up and had the dial done with their logo on. So before I get into the SN008 that was built for the BSH, there's one particular watch which they built that I want to give special mention to. The reason I want to do that is because this watch showcases the most powerful feature of the BSH. It is Brotherhood. There is a watch company who have based their business on building watches that hark back to classic submariners, classic dive watches, mill subs and the like. And that company is NTH. NTH stands for Nod to History. So the Brotherhood had hooked up with NTH, and they were working on NTH's very first ever collaboration. The watch that they were working on was built on NTH's yet to be released Barracuda. It was going to be a gilt dial, pencil hand, exposed crown diver. While the collaboration was happening, the wife of one of the brothers fell sick with cancer. And though she fought hard, she succumbed to the illness. The Brotherhood was so moved not only by the fact that she had passed, but they stood with their brother during the illness. On direct messages, late in the night, early in the morning, they encouraged him. This event was so traumatic, and it did what trauma so often does. It took those who faced it together, and it bound them as one. As a sign of their condolence for the loss of his wife, as a sign of the fact that they'd stood together in the battle, they named this watch after his wife. And it is now the BSH Carolina. It is a beautiful, beautiful timepiece. One of the brothers, Paul Haig, explained that he bought one of those Carolinas and he seldom wears it because it is so precious to him. The watch became like the bride. The watch became the thing that men stood around while friendship was born. As I've done research for this post, I've approached some of the members to tell me what it's been like to be in the Brotherhood. And I've received some interesting insights. I'm going to read a couple of inserts or excerpts from what they have to say to give you a feeling of what's really going on at the BSH. Speaking of his encounter with Camilo, the gentleman who lost his wife, Paul Haig writes, Camilo was given Carolina number 1, which is a very bittersweet thing for him, understandably. I'm very proud to own number 20, but I don't like wearing it. He speaks about how they were supporting their brother, often in the small hours of the night where he was, someone was awake to speak to him. Anyway, it is that level of support, friendship, and always having someone to listen and unburdened to that makes the Brotherhood something which is not so much to do with watches, and why brothers keep in contact when they lose the obsession to collect subs and move on to other things. Another brother, known as Whiskey Beer Bob, writes, I was hanging around in the thread way back in 2016. I was barely even known. Well, at least that's what I thought. You see, my family hits a real dark patch, and he speaks about some difficulties they faced together. I merely mentioned this in passing, Well, the messages I got from the brothers from all over the world, including various phone numbers, just a bunch of watch nerds who didn't know me. Hell, I was just a noob for 2 months, reaching out and checking in on me. Needless to say, they have my back and I have theirs. Another light-hearted story came from Dr. Windsurf. I was told I should ask him what happened with him. And so he writes, a few years ago I went windsurfing with my new Marine Master 300 Homage with a special dial which had been made by at Vincenzo. I had it for maybe a week. I did a spectacular wipeout and lost the watch in Lake Ramsey in a depth of about 20.5 meters, hence the depth rating. The brothers immediately sent me a G-Shock for future waterborne adventures and ordered and sent me a custom Marine Master 300 from San Martin with the Lady of the Lake dial. It is just stunning and so touching. I feel blessed to be a part of the Brotherhood every time I look at it. This is what the brothers do. If we think someone needs some cheering up, we send them a little something that will help them. Again and again, this is what I've found. The stories of men who found more than what they were expecting. The gentleman who reached out to me, Kirk Greer, he has his own story and he shared this. As others shared their lives, I shared some of mine. One major item was the declining health of my father and my desire for my son, my dad and I to take a Route 66 trip while Dad was still able to. So my ideas on planning this were sounded out on BSH-T threads. And when the trip happened, we posted from the road. The responses and support from the brothers were tremendous. And now that my father has just passed, many remember that trip and reference it in their condolences. And what of the SN008G? How did that come to pass? Like myself, I think a lot of folk who like the aesthetic of a vintage Submariner or a vintage dive watch really appreciate what's going on with the Black Bay 58. The fact that it's got unguarded crowns, the fact that it's a great size, the fact that it has a gilt dial. There's so much about that watch that just makes sense. And so when St. Martin revealed their plans to produce one, of course the BSH climbed onto that. They put out a thread, they listed it under the project thread, and they started collecting sign-ups. I'm not sure how many finally did, but it was more than 50. But what was special about their build was this. If you go to the St. Martin website, one of the products they offer is dial customization. It costs $25. As long as you have a vector file of what you want to use, you can pretty much put any logo, any text that you want onto the dial of a San Martin watch. But the Brotherhood did something super special. Because they transcended the figure of 50, they were able to negotiate not only a dial modification, they negotiated dial, crown, case back, and buckle. The buckle was the last in the boat. The final product is a superb watch. It's the first custom watch they've done where 4 different locations have been branded up specifically for them. But I'd like to let you in on a little secret. If you sign up on the Zone and you visit the projects thread, you will get front row action on a brand new watch that is being released by St. Martin. It's going to be branded for BSH. It has a mechanical movement and it has chrono pushes. If you're interested, get down to www.bsh.zone, sign up and begin to experience the magic of being part of something bigger than a watch.